He said it was temporary. That was the word he used. Temporary. Not permanent. Not dangerous. Not life-changing. Just temporary. And I believed him. Because trust doesn't feel risky when it's built slowly. It feels safe. It feels earned. It feels permanent. I had known him for almost 5 years by then. 5 years of shared dinners, shared routines, shared plans. 5 years of conversations about the future, about stability, about building something secure together. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't careless. He was calm, reliable, careful. At least, that's who I believed he was. So when he sat across from me one evening at our kitchen table, holding a stack of papers in his hand, nothing about the moment felt dangerous. The light above us was soft and warm, the same light we'd shared 1,000 ordinary evenings under. "This is just temporary," he said. He slid the papers toward me gently. Not urgently, not nervously, just calmly. "I need your help qualifying," he explained. Qualifying. Another harmless word. Another word that didn't sound permanent. "It won't affect you," he added quickly. "It's just to help the process go through faster." He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't asking for sacrifice. He was asking for my name. And names don't feel expensive when you give them to someone you trust. I looked down at the paper. Lines of text, paragraphs filled with legal language that didn't feel designed to be understood. It felt procedural, routine, something people signed every day, something forgettable. "Just until everything stabilizes," he said. Just until. Another temporary phrase. Temporary things don't stay. Temporary things don't follow you. Temporary things don't change your future. At least, that's what I believed. I held the pen in my hand. It didn't feel heavy. It didn't feel permanent. It felt like trust. It felt like support. It felt like something you do for someone you love. I signed. My name settled onto the paper quietly, without resistance, without warning, without understanding what it would eventually cost. He smiled when I handed it back. Not relieved, not emotional, just calm. "Thank you," he said. Thank you. 2 simple words. 2 permanent consequences. Life didn't change immediately. That's how permanent decisions hide themselves. They don't announce their impact. They wait. Days passed. Weeks passed. Months passed. Everything felt normal. Nothing looked different. Nothing felt different. The apartment was the same. The routines were the same. My life was the same. Which made it easy to forget the moment had ever happened. Temporary things disappear. Temporary things resolve themselves. Temporary things don't stay attached to you. Until one day, something did. It started with an email. Not urgent, not alarming, just unexpected. Subject line, account notification. I almost ignored it, because nothing in my life required notification. Nothing was wrong, nothing needed attention, nothing was permanent, or so I thought. I opened it casually, without fear, without preparation, without understanding that one word, temporary, had never been true. Because temporary agreements don't last forever, but permanent signatures do. And mine had never left. At first, the email didn't make sense. It wasn't threatening, it wasn't aggressive. It was calm, professional, routine, which somehow made it worse. Because calm emails don't arrive unless something already exists, something already recorded, something already permanent. I stared at the subject line again. Account notification. Not request, not invitation, notification. That word assumes agreement. It assumes responsibility. It assumes connection. I opened the message slowly, carefully, as if moving slower would somehow change what it said. Inside was a simple statement, an account number, a balance, and my name listed clearly, unmistakably, responsible party. My chest tightened, not from panic, but from recognition. Recognition of something I had allowed, something I had signed, something I had trusted would never follow me. The balance was larger than I expected. Not impossible, but not small enough to ignore, not small enough to dismiss, not small enough to pretend didn't belong to me. Because legally, it did. I sat there for a long time, reading the same lines over and over, trying to find the part that explained why my name was still there, trying to find the part where temporary ended, trying to find the part where I had been released. But there was no such part, because temporary had never been a legal term. Temporary was a promise, and promises don't exist inside contracts. Only signatures do. I logged into the account portal using the link provided. The screen loaded slowly, revealing information I had never seen before. Payment history, balance activity, missed payments, accumulated interest, all connected to my name. Not recently, not suddenly, gradually, quietly, while I had lived my life believing nothing was attached to me. The account hadn't disappeared. It had continued, without my attention, without my awareness, without my permission. But permission had already been given, the day I signed. I picked up my phone and called him. It rang longer than usual, long enough to feel unfamiliar, long enough to feel uncertain. When he answered, his voice sounded normal, relaxed, unaffected. "Hey," he said casually. I didn't respond immediately, because I didn't know how to ask the question without already knowing the answer. "I got an email," I said finally. Silence. Not confusion, not surprise. Silence, which told me everything before he spoke. "It's probably nothing," he said. Probably. Another temporary word. Another word that avoids permanence. "My name is still on the account," I said. Another silence. Longer this time. He exhaled slowly. "I thought it would have been removed by now." Thought. Not new, not confirmed, not insured. Thought. The kind of word people use when they hope responsibility resolves itself without effort. I reminded him, "You said it was temporary." "I know," he said quietly. Not defensive, not urgent, just quiet, which somehow felt worse, because urgency means something can still change. Calm means it already has. "I'll handle it," he added. Handle it. Another promise, another temporary phrase. But promises don't remove signatures. Only legal action does. Only payments do. Only responsibility does. And responsibility doesn't transfer itself automatically. It stays attached to the name that agreed. Mine. I ended the call without resolution, without reassurance, without clarity, because clarity had already been written years earlier, in ink, in my handwriting, in my signature. I checked my credit report that night. The account was there, active, connected, permanent. Temporary had never existed. It had only been spoken, not written, and spoken promises don't override written agreements. The system doesn't remember what was said. It remembers what was signed. And I had signed. The first real consequence didn't come from him. It came from the system, quietly, without emotion, without explanation. I saw it when I checked my credit score. It had dropped. Not dramatically, but enough to notice, enough to matter, enough to remind me that something I wasn't controlling was still controlling me. Credit scores don't ask why. They don't measure intention. They measure responsibility. And my name was still attached. I opened the account portal again. This time, I wasn't hoping it had disappeared. I was hoping it had stabilized, that the balance had stopped growing, that payments had resumed, that something had changed. But nothing had. The balance was higher than before. Interest had continued. Fees had accumulated. Time had done what time always does when responsibility is ignored. It had increased the cost. I scrolled through the payment history. Missed payments, partial payments, delays, inconsistency. All recorded, all permanent, all connected to me. Not emotionally, legally. That was the difference that mattered. I called the bank directly, not because I expected them to fix it, but because I needed to hear the truth clearly. Not from him, from the system itself. After verifying my identity, the representative explained calmly, "As a cosigner, you share full legal responsibility for the account." Full responsibility. Not partial, not temporary. Full. It didn't matter that I hadn't used the account. It didn't matter that I hadn't benefited from it. It didn't matter that the agreement had been described differently. What mattered was the signature, the agreement, the legal connection. If payments are missed, she continued, the responsibility applies equally to both parties. Equally. Not fairly, not emotionally, legally. Equal responsibility doesn't consider who promised to pay, it considers who agreed to be responsible. And I had agreed. I ended the call knowing something I hadn't fully accepted until that moment. There was no automatic escape, no expiration, no removal without resolution. Temporary had never been a legal condition, it had only been reassurance, and reassurance doesn't exist in contracts. Only signatures do. I stopped calling him after that, not because I didn't want answers, but because I understood answers didn't change agreements, even if he intended to fix it, even if he wanted to fix it. Intentions didn't change responsibility, only action did. And until action happened, the system would continue to recognize me as responsible. I made the first payment myself that night. Not because I believed it was fair, not because I believed it was right, because I understood it was real. The payment didn't feel like help, it felt like acceptance. Acceptance that responsibility had already been assigned years earlier. The balance didn't disappear, it didn't reduce dramatically, it simply acknowledged my participation, my signature, my agreement. That was enough. The hardest part wasn't losing the money, it was losing the belief that temporary meant safe. Because temporary is an emotional word, not a legal one. Legal agreements don't expire based on trust. They expire based on resolution. And resolution hadn't happened yet, which meant responsibility hadn't ended. It had only waited until now. Until the moment I realized something permanent had been created by something I believed was temporary. And permanence doesn't disappear. The first payment didn't fix anything. Not immediately. It didn't erase the balance. It didn't restore my credit score. It didn't undo the signature. It simply did one thing. It acknowledged reality. Responsibility doesn't disappear when it's unfair. It disappears when it's resolved. And resolution, I realized, was now my responsibility. Not because I wanted it to be, because legally it already was. I stopped waiting for him to fix it, stopped waiting for promises to become action, stopped waiting for temporary to become true. Waiting had been the illusion. Action was the only reality. I created a plan. Not emotional, not reactive, practical, measured, permanent. I adjusted my budget, reduced spending where I could, redirected money towards something I had never expected to pay. Not his account, not his responsibility, mine. Because the system didn't recognize emotional ownership, it recognized legal ownership. And my name was still there. Month after month, I made the payments, sometimes small, sometimes painful, always necessary. Each payment didn't feel like loss. It felt like reclaiming control, not over the past, but over the future. Slowly, the balance began to shrink. Not quickly enough to feel easy, but steadily enough to feel possible. Progress rarely feels dramatic. It feels quiet, incremental, invisible to everyone except the person living it. My credit score began to recover. Not instantly, not completely, but enough to remind me something important. Damage isn't permanent, but responsibility must be resolved before recovery begins. I stopped thinking about the moment I signed, stopped replaying the conversation, stopped asking why I trusted him, because the answer didn't change the outcome. Trust wasn't the mistake. Misunderstanding permanence was. Temporary isn't a legal condition, it's an emotional reassurance. And emotional reassurance doesn't override written agreement. I learned something during those months, something no one explains clearly. Responsibility doesn't follow intention, it follows signatures. The system doesn't know who promised what, it knows who agreed. An agreement doesn't expire automatically, it stays until resolution replaces it. The final payment didn't feel triumphant, it felt quiet, simple, complete. Not relief, not victory, closure. Closure isn't emotional, it's structural. It's the absence of obligation, the removal of responsibility, the return of control. My name was no longer attached, not emotionally, not legally, not permanently. Temporary had finally become true, but only because I made it true, not him, me. That was the part I didn't understand when I signed. Temporary doesn't exist unless someone takes responsibility for ending it, and responsibility doesn't follow promises, it follows action. I never signed anything blindly again, not because I was afraid, because I understood permanence. Because permanence isn't defined by intention, it's defined by agreement, and agreements don't disappear on their own. They wait until resolution replaces it. This time, that someone was me, and that changed everything. Have you ever trusted someone with your name or finances? What would you have done differently? Leave a comment. Your story might help someone else avoid the same mistake. And don't forget, like, share, and subscribe for more Untold American Life stories.